How do you know if you are avoiding the pain of loss? Perhaps you had a loved one who recently passed away, or a relationship that was really important to you ended recently, or perhaps some of these things happened many years ago and you're still noticing maybe there's some unprocessed grief there. In today's video, I'm going to go over 7 specific signs that often manifest as a result of unprocessed emotional grief. Compulsive behaviors, addiction to distraction, endless scrolling, overeating, substance abuse. We as humans, we want to move towards pleasure and away from pain. And so sometimes we will use destructive things if it's going to move us towards pleasure and away from pain, even if it's not necessarily pleasurable, but it's neutral. In other words, if we can just numb the emotional pain to not have to feel the pain, we'll do that. So overeating or using different types of substances, drugs or alcohol. I had a client that I worked with a number of years ago who served in the Marines, and he had done 2 different tours overseas. And what was interesting is that after just a handful of sessions of our work together, working on healing the emotional pain that he experienced, what he said is that he noticed a really big difference in his relationship to marijuana. He had shared with me that for a number of years prior to us working together, he used to smoke weed every single day. Why? Because it was, as he said, it was his medicine. It was his way of coping with the world, right? It served a purpose of numbing that emotional pain and being able to cope. And he didn't see anything wrong with that because it was serving a really good purpose, right? And the work that he and I did together had nothing to do with marijuana. He wasn't trying to stop smoking because, again, it was really working well for him. But what he shared with me, that after a number of sessions working together on healing the emotional pain, is that his relationship with marijuana did a complete 180. It no longer calmed him. It made him super anxious. It no longer allowed him to cope in public. It just had the opposite effect. And so what he was sharing is that what he concluded is that because we were healing the emotional pain, that the substance was being utilized to put a Band-Aid on. There was no more need to put a Band-Aid on it because the emotional pain was being healed. So I'm just sharing that with you to hopefully invite you to have some compassion on yourself if you're noticing that you are stuck in any kind of loop of compulsion to a destructive pattern that you know in the long run is not going to be serving you. So let that be an invitation to just be gentle with yourself and lean into healing your emotional pain, healing the things that have been compelling you to use the things to numb the pain. Because if we can get to the root of the pain and heal the pain, then there's no more need for those behaviors. Relationship withdrawal, pulling away to avoid questions or sudden emotional triggers. So you might notice that perhaps the people or the person that you lost, again, whether it was a relationship or if it was someone that you lost that is no longer with us, perhaps they passed away, there's often a tendency to avoid people that are associated with those people. In other words, like their friends or family members that remind you of that person, or maybe family members or friends that really mean well, but they're more likely going to be asking you questions that you may not be ready to answer, right? So you might be noticing yourself avoiding those people as a way to cope. Overfunctioning, the illusion of being fine by drowning in work or caring for everyone else. I also see this in characteristics of people just being very, very busy and filling up their calendar with go, 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 go. Don't rest, don't stop, go, go, go. Because when you allow yourself to slow down enough to rest, then the mind can bring forth the thing that you've been avoiding. The body can bring forth things that you've been avoiding. And in efforts to not go there or not feel that emotional pain, it's very common for people to be driven to nonstop working or nonstop caretaking, taking care of other people so they don't have to face what they're experiencing in their heart and their mind and their body, because the emotional pain is so very strong. Unexplained irritability, using conflict and drama as a distraction from internal pain. So you might also notice that you just snap. You feel very irritable, you get triggered really easily, and you're noticing that perhaps you start majoring in the minors and minoring in the majors. In other words, the tiniest little things are the things that your brain gets fixated on, or perhaps you start getting into arguments with colleagues or coworkers or significant others, and it's almost a way for your brain to deflect and put more emphasis on arguing about something versus allowing yourself to feel what's really under the surface, the emotional pain of the loss, because it's so heavy and you might feel like, I just can't go there. So unconsciously, you may find yourself starting arguments with others, or again, focusing on things that are really not such a big deal in the big scheme of things, but you tend to just kind of blow them out of proportion. Persistent sleep issues, chronic disruption of rest cycles. Do you notice yourself waking up in the middle of the night? And it's not because you have to go to the bathroom, and it's not because your alarm went off, right? You start waking up in the middle of the night and you're feeling restless, and it might be difficult for you to fall back asleep. Or even if you can fall back asleep, you just notice this pattern of waking up in the middle of the night, especially between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. Why between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m.? That time frame is associated with the lungs regenerating. This is based in Chinese medicine, and basically what the lungs are often associated with as well, or what they are associated with, is grief and loss and yearning and anything related to that sadness. If you're feeling or have some unresolved grief or sadness lingering below the surface, it's very common to wake up in the middle of the night between 3 and 5 a.m. And the other thing that's interesting about disruptive sleep cycles is when your body is grieving, it can put your body into a state of fight or flight. And that, even if it's just a low grade activation of being in that fight or flight response, it can start to elevate cortisol levels later in the day, which makes it very difficult to get deep sleep all the way throughout the night. Emerging physical symptoms, headaches, digestive issues, and muscle tension as the body keeps the score. What does that actually mean? The body keeps the score. Basically, what that means is that the issues are in the tissues. In other words, the emotions that are unresolved, the healing that is yet to be healed, resides in your body. Emotions are actually physiological. They're tiny little information substances, and they reside in your body. And so oftentimes when you have unresolved grief or any kind of emotional pain, it can start manifesting as physical symptoms. Another common thing that's very common with grief is issues with the lungs and respiratory problems. So you might notice an onset of a respiratory infection or asthma or coughing or difficulty breathing. Those are also very common as a result of unprocessed grief. Worsening mental health, slipping from natural mourning into clinical anxiety or even suicidality. If you're noticing that you're having difficulty following through on everyday tasks, or perhaps your responsibilities, such as showing up to your job, are starting to fall through the cracks. Maybe you're not showing up to your job. Maybe your job is on the line now because the symptoms have been so pervasive that it's impacting you that much. That's when it's really important to consider reaching out to a trusted professional that can really help guide you through the healing process, perhaps even give you some positive coping skills, some things that are actually going to support your mind and your body as you heal the pain. So we talked about 7 specific behavioral, emotional, and physical signs that may be demonstrating to you that you have unprocessed grief. Which one of those stands out to you the most? Do you notice any of those within yourself? Please leave that in the comments below. Unfortunately, none of us can escape the pain of grief and loss. Every single one of us is going to experience loss at some point in our life. And sometimes it will be multiple times in our life. And so what can we do to support our minds and our bodies through that? One of the most common things that I hear from a lot of my clients is, how do I begin to process my emotions? I've talked about it and that helps a little bit, but I still feel the depth of the pain. I journal about it, but I still feel a lot of the emotional pain. I have done this, I have done that. What can I actually do to move the needle? And I actually created this stress tool. It's called the Grief Relief Tool for you specifically. If you are noticing yourself going through any kind of grief or loss, or you notice yourself in any one of those 7 symptoms that we talked about in this video, I created this grief tool for you because I've used it so much with so many of my clients in my one-on-one work. But I know that I can't work with everybody one-on-one, but I can offer you this simple solution that's going to help to soften the emotions. It doesn't mean it's going to take grief away, because there is no cure for grief, unfortunately. There's not a pill for grief. There's not a tool that's just going to eliminate grief. Grief is a natural part of when we care about something or someone and we love someone deeply. It's the price that we pay for love. And the only way that we can move through grief is simply actually to grieve. And so the grief tool only takes just a few minutes a day, and it can really greatly, significantly, in some cases, significantly reduce the emotional pain and help to move it out of your body. When the waves come, because the waves will, the waves always come, right? When the waves come, what this tool is designed to do is to soften the blow of the waves. If that wave is a 10 out of 10, it might reduce it down to a 7 out of 10. If that wave is an 8 out of 10, it might reduce it down to a 3 out of 10. It softens it. And so it makes it more manageable for your nervous system. So it can improve a lot of these physical, emotional, and behavioral things we talked about in today's video. So I'll leave the link to the grief relief tool in the comments below, and I hope it's helpful for you.